3 claps and a hum.
Yes.
I was awakened with a start. It was a familiar sound that I've heard, but this time it created a knot in my stomach. It was 4:30 a.m. and I was in my charming San Francisco 1920s style Art Deco apartment. Soon I'd leave. This is a dwelling at 30th and Fulton, across from the west end of the Golden Gate Park. All around me were packing boxes. Some were labeled "Take to Oregon." Some said Salvation Army or Goodwill. But that dream caused such distress, and that dream might delay my departure. It was always the same. It was always the same. In the dream, I was in the office of Jay, the social services director of the Pomeroy Center, where I had worked for years. From up the hall, I heard the familiar clap, 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 but this time it was not accompanied by the usual laughter and humming. There were wailing sounds of anguish and grief. My friend Betti, a petite little woman with salt and pepper hair, entered panting and pointing at us. You. Then she pointed to herself. I gathered that her mother must have died and that she wanted our help. But she was now the ward of the state because her mother had not made provisions for us. And we had to explain, we can't do anything for you. We can advocate for you. We can talk to the judge and tell him what you like. And the judge will get help and he may listen to us. No. I had to make sure that this was going to just be a warning dream and not a prophetic dream. So I might have to delay moving to Coos Bay, Oregon, stay a little longer, and visit Betty's mother, Lucille. Now let's put up the page that shows the chapters. Do you have this one? Okay. Part 1, Betty's World. Janet Pomeroy and her center. Okay. Janet Pomeroy was a great woman in San Francisco, but as a teen in Texas, she was the 10th of 11 children and contracted polio. And memories of the loneliness in the hospital and the isolation made her sensitive to other people's pain and needs. She decided to pledge her life to helping others, and she sought guidance from God if this was the right path. So in San Francisco, and she had lived in the Bay Area for a while, she found a place in an abandoned pool building, swimming pool building, and was able to set up a classroom or recreation area for 5 disabled teens with cerebral palsy. We forget there's so much going on today that people can participate in, where everything is equal, but in those days, these 5 teenagers were just shut away. They were even the families were even a little embarrassed and they were hidden away. And so when she started this program for them, at the end of the day, they refused to go home. They felt so free and so happy. And so she felt she was on the right path. She created her own master's degree program at San Francisco State. And in fact, then they took her master's degree program and turned it into a degree program that others could follow in recreational therapy. So they were having a blast when one day a nurse came to her and said, there are 300 children in the Bay Area that are scheduled to go to the state institution. In those days, again, doctors did the best that they thought they were doing, and they would tell parents, well, when your child's a toddler, you can turn her over to the state and they'll know what to do best, and then just have more children, go on with your lives, because generally these children don't live beyond 22 years anyway, and they'll be with their own kind. I mean, even doctors said this, but this nurse she'd heard about Janet, and she just had a feeling, and this could not happen, this could not happen. So Janet said, 300 children, toddlers, even infants, in my swimming pool building? And she said, yes, I'll take them. Just give me a couple of weeks to find help, to find volunteers. So she called all the retired school teachers that she could, and she started a volunteer staff. And Janet would say that if she tried to do the same thing today, there'd be lawsuits galore, because they carried them in their arms from a car to the building, and but the parents were so grateful, because this meant they could keep their children. Well, Betty, the lady you see the picture above, when she was born, they had to use forceps, and it pinched an area in her brain so that she was born with some mental retardation. They didn't know how much, but it affected the area where she couldn't speak. And it also, she had cerebral palsy, so she would always have a little limp. So the same frustration happened to Betty's parents. They were both people with business degrees, but just to be able to watch her, look out for her, the husband took a night job, the wife took a day job, and then they did their best to look after her, because they were not going to send her to an institution. And they were tired of doctors saying that she wouldn't live until maybe age 22. And I just have to go ahead in time and tell you, she's going to be 74 next week. So she couldn't find anyone who would help her, and someone told her about Janet Pomeroy, and so she called her. Because she had tried to take Betty to various organizations, and they would say either, she's too high functioning for our group, she's too low functioning, she has cerebral palsy, but cerebral palsy don't want to be linked with people with mental retardation. It drags them down. There was even prejudice there. And so someone told her about Janet, and she called, and Janet Pomeroy said, oh yes, I'm interested in her, bring her over. And she said, so will you interview us? And she said, no, I want her, bring her. And so Lucille Peterson became devoted to Betty Peterson, to Janet Pomeroy after that. She said, anything I could do for the rest of my life was a way of saying thank you for the day she said yes to my daughter. So they went on working together. Lucille went on the board of directors, and at that time they had a parents group, and she became president of the parents group. In fact, it was a feisty group. They said of themselves, they had to fight so much for laws for their children, to openings in school for their children, that they said, we just can't stop fighting. We fight each other, we fight anybody. And so when they discovered Lucille, they not only nominated her and elected her as president, they'd heard of Baby Doc, the dictator in Haiti. They named her president for life. Because she had this quality. Her motto was keep them laughing. And her other thing was always say, refreshments will be served. That's the only way we'll get men to the meetings. And she'd grown up outside of Detroit, and she had a tough quality if it was needed. So under her guidance, they'd never been so effective. They never accomplished so much. They never raised so much money, and did it while they were laughing and having a good time. And occasionally she'd have to go Detroit on them and be tough. Well, they loved that too. Janet Pomeroy would say, there's something about Lucille. Grown men turn into 15-year-old boys in her presence. And I'm going to say, find this photo. She up there? when I first met her, I said, Lucille, were you ever a showgirl?
Yeah.
And she said, no, I was influenced by showgirls. She said, I got a business degree and went working for businesses, and I was bored out of my skull. So she saved her money. She bought concession with the hat and coat check and candy and cigarette check in the largest nightclub in Detroit.
Oh, wow.
She, and because she didn't drink, she was really successful. She concentrated on it. She did pick up smoking so she could stay awake. Anyway, her family were strict Lutherans, and this did disturb them. They were such strict Lutherans that they didn't eat devil's food cake. Her grandmother once went past a bakery and they asked her, would she like some devil's food cake? And she said, we are Lutherans, and as such, we have nothing to do with the devil or his cake. So she kind of held her breath when Lucille started the work with the nightclub. But the grandmother was pleased when Lucille brought home autographs from Tony Bennett, Sophie Tucker, Jimmy Durante, Sally Rand, the fan dancer. I don't know if there's anyone who knows that. And so that was kind of exciting. But then she met Handsome Harry, married him. They moved to San Francisco and they had Betti and started not only their little family, but a life of helping others. Lucy, it was just in Lucille, she was just a classy woman. I mean, she could be tough and then turn around and make you laugh. But in the Parents Auxiliary, there was one woman who did not like Lucille. She was the treasurer. And during the meetings, it would be distracting. She'd be standing behind Lucille and making donkey ears and just being really disrespectful and doing, childish things. And they would say to Lucille, can't we vote her out and get a different treasurer? And Lucille would say, no. Don't you notice that she's making fun of you? And Lucille said, I don't care. She has a daughter who is mute, like my daughter. Only she has autism. She can't give or receive love to her mother. Her mother is estranged from her family. She's a widow. Being treasurer of the auxiliary is the only thing she has. So we're keeping her. Well, in time, I might get a hanky here and there. In time, the woman named Gloria was found to have terminal cancer. And so she went to Lucille and asked her, will you go with the social workers, make sure she's put in a good board and care home where little Annette will be okay, someplace where they can understand people with autism. And then the Bay Area hospitals and care centers were so crowded. Gloria was her name, the treasurer, was going to be sent to a center in San Jose. And Lucille said, that's so far away. No one could visit you, Gloria. I have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath apartment. Would you like to come and live with Betti and me? Hospice can come and see you every day, and we'll do whatever is required. And Gloria lived a whole lot longer than was expected. She was so happy. No more making fun of Lucille because, in a way, she felt like she triumphed. She finally got the attention from Lucille. And she was finally the top person. Occasionally she'd say, nobody else is being treasurer, are they? And Lucille would say, no one else could be treasurer. You're always going to be treasurer, Gloria. Well, my first day working at the center as director of development was the first time I heard the, because Betti, being mute, found, and she was not able to learn American Sign Language, she invented ways to communicate with people. And the clap, clap, clap was usually followed by a different pitch for different sounds. And so I was just arranging my pencil drawer in my office when the door flung open, notebooks flew off the shelves, and there was this little tiny woman with salt and pepper hair giving me her hand, a vigorous handshake welcoming me. Well, my assistant, Robbie, came in, and Janet had said I should just spend the day with him, and he'd show me around the center. And he explained to me what had happened to Betty and why she would have, and he said, she wants people to know she would have been normal. And so she introduced herself and she was off. He said, she wants to go tell everyone that she met you and that you're here. And he said, don't worry, she's going to come back and see you 5 or 6 times every day that you're here. And so he started showing me the center that Janet Pomeroy started. Remember I said that started in the warm water pool bathhouse. She outgrew that, obviously. And she had a board of directors, mostly Italian Catholics. And they petitioned to Mayor Aliotto at the time to let her lease a Boy Scout camp that was on the edge of town across from the San Francisco Zoo, 5.5 acres. And she leased it for $1 a year. And the understanding was any buildings that she built, if she vacated, the city gets the buildings. Well, she started just with one simple building, but she always went to what she said, she went to God's best. And God had directed her to a wonderful architect, another Catholic. And so the whole system that she created, it all looked, it wasn't just patchy little boxes. It had a gorgeous look to it. If you drove past it today, you would think like, oh, that must be a community college. It doesn't look like, oh, here's a pathetic place for people with disabilities. It's people are laughing, they're clapping, they're singing, they're cooking, they're doing art in the art room. She has a huge warm water wheelchair accessible pool. The wheelchairs are sort of a synthetic, and so people can sit in it and then float right out of the chair into the pool. She added a drama department, all of these things, but she did them all under prayer. Every building has a little square that says, lest God build a house, you labor in vain who built it. And she became, for people who were kind of disenchanted with their churches, she and her center became their church. People would just say that, this is my church. This is where I get my spiritual nourishment. This is who prays for me. So, on my second day, Janet invited me in and to her office and wanted to know how I did. And she pulled open the drawer, the top side drawer of her desk, and there was a Bible and several square little books by Kenneth E. Hagin. And she said, I perceive that you're a believer. I wonder if you'd be interested in any of these little books. And I said, I think I have them all. And she said, why should I be surprised? He told me he was sending someone. And she said, well, but why did you pick us? Because you've worked in much more prestigious places in the Bay Area than here. And I said, well, I like your message. I like your mission. And I like the fact that you work for a princely salary. In the 60 years that she was with the center, she never drew a penny and gave as much as she could. So it was good to remember old times and learn about this woman who was so resilient in her faith. Just information would come to her, do this, see that person. Remember once she had her week all planned, she changed everything. She said, I have to go see old Mrs. Gellert. And it was like, why? Can't you do it another week? I have to go see old Mrs. Gellert. Because God knew that old Mrs. Gellert was changing her will and was about to die. And so that's why we have Gellert Hall in the theater area. And so she lived everything out of the Spirit. She was a Spirit-filled lady. And so it wouldn't make sense to good, hard-headed businessmen. Like, they would ask in the board of directors meetings, are we going to build any more buildings? Would you let us know? Will God tell you when you're going to? And it kind of would have been a joke, but a friend's husband had been with the development department of the University of Southern California. And when I gave him the tour, he said, had she been a hard-headed businessman, you wouldn't have half of what you have here. And it was just thrilling, and it helped people believe. And I've often said, if I have a ministry at all, it's to encourage people. And the way I encourage people is through stories, but they have to be real stories. And I have so many stories, encouraging stories, when people with such severe disabilities, and yet they would be the happiest people, you know. Our whole adult camp program was because there was a woman, she was found in a chicken yard in Mexico, body so twisted and turned. Somehow they got her to San Francisco, into the center, and so she was in a bed most of the time. And we had one board member, another Italian Catholic man, who really, he supported the program for camping just because of her, but just because of Gina. All he wanted to know was Gina happy? And so I knew I had to take pictures of Gina, the biggest smile you'd ever see, and I'd say, Gina, you just gave me a $30,000 smile. I'm going to give this picture of you to the donor who donated the $30,000 for camp. And so her smile made camp possible for a lot of other people too. Well, I finally decided it was good to remember these old times, but I have to think about moving to Oregon, moving to Coos Bay, and making sure that Betti was protected, so I had to go see her mother, Lucille. Lucille was at the kitchen table. She was folding flyers and stuffing them, which she's usually doing that, smoothing. And so I thought, I just have to start right at the beginning and tell her about the dream. And she said, what, do you think I'm gonna croak? And I said, well, it could happen, yes, someday, a long time from now, but it could happen, and I'm just thinking of Betti. And she said, she dropped her head, and then she covered her face with her hands and let out a sob and said, don't you think your bad dream is nothing compared to the nightmare I have 24 hours a day, every day, ever since I passed 80? And so I said, well, we can do something about it. Remember, I had that special needs attorney come to speak to the auxiliary. I was really just calling her to be there for you. And she said, well, I realized I have two nieces. They love Betti, but the men in their lives do not. They think that she should be in a place, just put away someplace. I'm invited to Thanksgiving dinner on the condition that I don't bring Betti with me, so I've never been to their Thanksgiving dinner. And she said, the people I can trust are older than I am and have adult children of their own. And she said, I thought you could be a conservator for Betti, just living 10 blocks away, but now you're moving to Oregon. I said, well, I already started working on this plan. I called Liz Green, the special needs attorney, and she said that I could be Betti's conservator if we had another conservator who lived in the Bay Area, that if there was an emergency, she could be there within hours. And Lou says, I never thought of it before. Shirley R. is the head of a special organization that teaches disabled people how to hold down jobs and work and train them. She said she wouldn't have much time, but the qualifications, she works with people in the legislature. She goes to Washington. She's on convention. She knows the laws. She knows everything that we would need to know if there was some legal crisis. She know where to go and what to do. So now we had a team. As Liz Green said, Lucille would be the lead conservator, and then Shirley and I would be under her, and should that occasion happen a long time from now, then we would just move seamlessly into place. There'd be no going to court. There'd be no question of who is in charge of Betti. And I said, Lucille, I'd like you to sit down and write a notebook for me with everything you would like for Betti, what you see for her future. Talk to Betti too about it, so that we could make decisions based on your long relationship, what is really right for her. And Lucille said, well, for one thing, I don't want her to go to a board and care home, even though people will always say that's the safest place. And you can't be sure about supported living. That's where there are organizations that they'll provide, somebody will be there 24 hours a day or accompany the person out in the community. Now, most of her day she'd be at the center for maybe 6 hours a day, so they wouldn't have to have someone there. And California's system is set up so that there are regional centers that help get the funds to provide funding for programs like this. And she said, I know it would be taking a chance, but she said, I know of a case where a woman who also was mute, but she was bedbound, was in a board and care home where she'd be safe, and she became pregnant by someone that had been there for a while. They could tell by the features who that person probably was. The baby was born blind, and they didn't know what else, and the social worker adopted that baby. So Lucille said there's no real way to guarantee safety. In fact, boys and girls who are born mute, they're at the highest risk of rape. And Lucille used to get on the bus with Betti, go down to the ocean, especially when the surf was high. And Betti couldn't speak with words. She could make sounds, and they would practice getting Betti to scream. And she'd yell, scream, Betti, scream. All right, if a man touches you that you don't want, scream, Betti, scream. And that was a big gift that Lucille gave to her. I think at some point Betti did have to use the scream. We don't know, but from her agitation and behavior, pounding her chest, things that were not characteristic, I felt something like that might have happened, but I think she used her scream. So in order to qualify to become conservators, if this was going to be a court action, that meant I had to stay longer because they had to set up interviews from the Superior Court with people who they want to see your home, how you're living, how you interact with the participant. They want to interview you separately. They want to interview you together. And we were just blessed that it only took about 3 months for us to get through all the interviews. And the interviewers were impressive, really wonderful women who knew what they were doing and liked us and liked Betti and liked our case. So we got a court date. And so Liz Green was there with Shirley, with Betti, with, of course, Lucille. No, not Betti, I'm sorry, with Shirley and me and Lucille. Lucille felt it would be too stimulating for Betti because in her 40s, Betti was still going through her teen years in behavior. And so she would do something like grab somebody's purse and want to go in it and see if she could find something or interrupt something to get a business card. Because business cards were kind of her key to communication. She had a photographic memory. And so if she had someone's card, 15 years later, if you talked about that person, she would rummage through her trunk and get the card. So it was best that Betti not be in the court. So things were going along fine. And just like a scene from a Perry Mason film, the double doors in the court flung open. 2 tall, beautifully dressed, elegant women walked in the court side by side and said, Your Honor, we're sorry to interrupt here, but we are the attorneys for Betti. And we were just shocked. Liz Green wasn't, but we were shocked. And Lucille was saying, Betti has an attorney? Betti's against me? How would Betti get an attorney? How would she get these 2 women? And I whispered to Liz Green, the attorney, that one's wearing an Armani suit. And Liz Green said to me, yeah, and the other one who has the red alligator skin briefcase, that's a $500 briefcase. And anyway, they said, it's unusual, 3 women being conservators. There's bound to be trouble. There's bound to be bickering and confusion and upsetting Betti. This would not serve her well. We would suggest that you allow the state of California to assign professionally trained conservators that are approved by the state. And you could just see it. I was worried. Lucille was so upset. I thought, oh my gosh, could she have a heart attack or something right here? What a shock. And she said, I can't believe it. Why would Betti not want me? And the attorneys, Liz Green, said, they don't even know what Betti looks like. They've never met her. They were reading computer printouts of different cases, and they happened to see this. And she said, probably, see how they're dressed? They probably wanted to leave Sacramento and have some nice lunches out in San Francisco. And then there might be a shoe sale at Nordstrom's. And so Liz did her best. And she said the worst they could do is just delay us a few weeks. Nothing bad is going to happen. The judge said, we're going to take a recess. I want all the records to see again. I want the interviewers to come. I want to talk to the interviewers from Superior Court. And just come back after lunch. Lucille was so upset that she couldn't hold her cigarette. I had to light it for her. And the thought that, can they take Betti? Are they going to take her away from me right now just because I tried to do this conservatorship for her? So when we came in, the judge was, serious, but she said, I have reviewed for the second and third time all of these materials, and I've spoken in depth with the interviewers. And the court has ruled that these three women are of one mind. And it was done. We had to go back and take some courses and sign some papers, but Betti was protected now. Her mom was a conservator, she had the co-conservators under her, she had a plan. So for 2 or 3 years, we'd all get together, we'd go out and do things, celebrate Betti's birthday or Christmas or Thanksgiving or something. By that time I was living in Oregon, and I would drive down. I had to stretch out my time in San Francisco because I was still doing some part-time work for the center, and I had to keep that apartment because of rent control. Once I left, I had rented it for $300, and then it went up to $800, but it couldn't go higher than that. The day I left, it would be $2,400 or $3,000 a month. And so the landlord of our apartment house, if any elders would see him, they'd say, you're just waiting for me to die, but I'm not going to die. I'm not going to die because of rent control. I'm going to stay. And this is something Lucille worried about too. She said if anything was wrong with any of the appliances or anything, she fixed it herself or she just let it go. She didn't want the landlord to feel anything that made her turn against them. So I was working happily in Oregon. I had created a fulfillment business for 800 numbers that call late at night. That's a different story. But anyway, I had to find something to support myself because I couldn't find employment in Coos Bay that would help me pay my mortgage. But one day I received a call. That call that we dreaded. Lucille had a stroke. And her nieces rose to the occasion. Somehow they had her in a hospital on their side near anyway, on their side of the bridge, of the Golden Gate Bridge. And it looked like then Lucille was rallying, and she had said she didn't want Betti to see her in that condition, so don't bring Betti to visit. But then she got pneumonia, and she was dying. And Shirley and I both agreed Betti needs to see her mom, and her mom needs to see her. And the nieces, who had risen to the occasion, but said no, Lucille said no, she does not want Betti to see her this way. And so we had to be stern about this because they said any woman who's around 50 and her mother's dying needs to see her mother. Just for her mother to suddenly be gone, no, that would be too hard on her. So that was achieved. Shirley, being so involved in the community for people with disabilities, immediately got us signed up with an organization that could provide someone to be there when she was not at the center, or some of the weekends she was going to spend with her cousin, Lucille's niece. And so then Shirley, again thinking, said, Ola, we better make sure that Betty's name is on the lease, because if it's not, she won't have a place to live. And so we went to the apartment, and it was a shambles. The furniture was gone. There were piles of files and everything all over. The Filipino lady that came with the organization said, oh, the cousins came and they took all the furniture. They said, Betty's going to a boarding care home. She won't need this furniture. And so they're gone, and the furniture's gone. I didn't know what to do. And so, well, we realized that at least they dumped all the files that had been in the big cabinet. They didn't put them in any kind of order. But so we looked for the lease. And remember, I said, Betty has a photographic memory. And Betty was sitting on the couch, 1 foot out, like she was going to enter into a race. And I said, Betty, do you know what the lease is that we're looking for? And she said yes, and she gave a couple claps. I said, Betty, do you think you could find it? She leaned forward from the couch, reached in the middle of the pile, pulled it out. We had searched and searched, but she's got that memory. She knew it was between these files. And so we looked. Lucille and Harry Peterson and their daughter, Betty Lou. So I made a copy, and I went to see the owner of the apartment building and showed it to her and told her things would not seem really any different. Betty would have someone with her 24 hours a day. She would never be alone, and her life would just continue on, going to the center, and she'd just be living her life. So that seemed like that was okay. But on one of my trips down, and now in those days, if you can remember at Coos Bay, Alaska Airlines had these cute little planes, mostly that took mushrooms to San Francisco. It wasn't expensive. You could buy a book of tickets. You didn't have to do an adventure. You could just show up with your ticket and go to San Francisco. And I had this trick that I did. I would fly down in the morning, and then I would take the bus back at night, and I'd be back here in Coos Bay by 10. So I did that. And I came to visit the apartment, and something was different about the apartment. There were 2 young women there, and Betty was with me, and they were making frozen dinners, and I heard them saying, Betty, eat faster, eat faster, because Maria's son is going to be here. And I was like, why do you tell Betty to eat faster? And then I had a feeling something seemed strange about the apartment. I went in her bedroom, her clothes were all gone. I looked in the cabinet, her medicine was gone, her toiletries were gone. And I said, Betty, do you live here? And she shrugged. And I asked these young girls, where does Betty live? And she said, oh, well, she lives here, and she lives in Daly City. So I discovered that Maria, a nice Filipino lady, wanted to babysit for her granddaughter so that her daughter could work. And the way she could do that was bring Betty to her house, and she could watch Betty and her granddaughter at the same time. And it was easiest if Betty just lived there. They brought the clothes and everything. In her mind, I'm still giving care to Betty, she said, excepting she doesn't like to see Happy Days in Tagalog. But other than that, she's fitting in. She likes the food. She sleeps on a mat in the floor. We all sleep on mats on the floor. There are 2 couples and my daughter, and Betty just sleeps on that. But she never sleeps alone. Someone always sleeps with her. And I was both dejected, sickened, and white hot with anger. I said, don't you know, you have to advise us if you've done something, if you've taken her someplace. This is not right. This is almost like kidnapping. And the thing that's worse is the other staff all knew. Even the administrators had to know that they had just taken her. So I called Shirley, and she immediately found another organization. I wrote a letter to the state. They wrote a letter to the state saying this farm woman from Oregon doesn't understand diverse populations, and we are willing to give her training. Oh my God. And so Shirley quickly got us set up with another organization that was smaller, but would be better. But we needed the key person. The key person had to be the live-in, who's there most of the times in the evenings till mornings, that you could count on. And if somebody misses their shift, that person takes it. And so Shirley again was going to do the interviewing, and she called and she said, well, I'm supposed to interview 3 people, but I interviewed this one woman, and I don't know. I don't think I want to interview anybody else. She kind of has the personality of, let me find the picture here. Find this photo, please. Yep. Okay, you found it? It's up there? Okay. She kind of has the personality of Betty's mother, Lucille. She's kind of cheery but dramatic. She has red hair, and she wears hats like you do. And so I said, okay, we'll probably go with it, but I want to pass this across the desk of Jay, our manager of social services. So I called him up and said, do you know anything about a caregiver person, night shift person named Shirley Ann? And he said, no, I don't know. And I said, she goes by her initials. He said, are they AJ? I said, yes, those are her initials, AJ. He said, oh, get her if you can. Get her if you can. She has great qualifications, and she's just special. I don't know where she lives, but she likes to take hard cases, like young black men who are out of the state institution and they're on the brink of being sent back because they are not able to follow the therapy program because they don't trust the white therapist. And AJ has turned around cases like this. And he said, she kind of like the Lone Ranger. She looks for someone in trouble, fires the silver bullet, and rides on. And so he said, I could see her with Betty. I said, in fact, did I forget to tell you she's a hoot? As long as Betty has her, she will laugh every day. I can't help but go to the end now. They've been together for 18 years, still laughing. Well, so it was going to be AJ's first day. She settled in, and it was understood that I was going to come in a few days and meet her. But I got a call the end of her very first day, and Shirley said to call you if something comes up. Shirley's out of town. She said, someone just slid an envelope under the door. Do you want me to open it, or do you want to wait until you come here? I said, oh, open it. I could hear a paper ruffling, and she said, she's evicted. I said, does it say why? She said, yes. It's a no-fault eviction because a family member is coming from Hong Kong and needs Betty's apartment. I said, does it say her elderly father? I said, her father has lived upstairs above Betty for the last 3 years. I've talked to him. But yeah, I knew you can't fight this. I've known people who tried. And they can always say, he just wanted to see if he liked living there. But anyway, when I talked to her, I said, okay, we got the message, and we will abide by it. I told her, this morning I flew in and I went directly to the rent board and tried to learn more about this, and they said, yes, it has to be a close relative, can't be a cousin, because how many cousins can you have in China? But they said, we can take extra time before leaving because of Betty's 3 things: being over 50, being multiply disabled, and I can't remember what the other thing but there were 3 reasons why she could get an extension in time. And they said, you may also not know that anyone who has a no-fault eviction, they didn't do anything to break the lease or anything, is supposed to receive $1,500 from the landlord just to make things go easier. Mm-hmm. But because Betty's over 50, their amount increases. And because she was born with a disability, major disability, the amount goes up to $7,000. On the conditions that when she leaves, everything has to be spick and span and perfect, and then the landlord is required to give $7,000. So I had this in writing, and I showed it to Karen, the landlord, that we'd be there longer, but we would not overstay. We were going to find a place. Well, she said, well, she should go in a board and care home. That's where she belongs. I got so tired of people saying that's where she belongs. And he said, well, we're going to try some other options. But we just wanted you to know, we'll continue on paying the rent. We will continue doing everything that we're supposed to do, keeping the place as clean and tidy as we can, and we'll stay in touch with you. So I brought my Bible with me, and I said, like, are you up for prayer? And she said, oh yeah, my grandfather was a Church of Christ pastor. So yeah, we Betty and AJ sat on the couch. I sat on a chair opposite. And I read from the scriptures, we prayed, we'd be quiet. Scriptures, prayer, quiet. Scriptures, prayer, quiet. And I saw in my spirit a golden kind of gossamer, sort of like a parachute, but it just kind of made of air, but it came down over all of us. And it settled on Betty. There was a golden glow around Betty, and I thought, we're being told there's an answer. All we have to do is listen, keep praying. We set up an appointment that a certain day every week we would pray over the phone together, we would read scriptures together, and just any inkling of what we're supposed to do, we would share with one another. So we just went on, and why this was so real and had to be from God was I thought, I can't make myself worry. I can't feel any worry. I don't feel any fear. I later learned that HA is a person who is kind of a worry wart. She couldn't worry. We just were in this state of quiet, inner quiet, outer quiet. We did what we were supposed to do, accomplished things, didn't tell anybody that she was evicted, didn't want to have people saying, oh, no, what are you going to do? And I remember that there were people who have little cottages in their backyard, and I've known people who rented those cottages, and usually it was something like some eccentric person that wasn't in it for the money, that was willing to, and that's what I had in mind, because that's the only alternative I knew. And Shirley was just mixing around, talking with people at the different agencies, and she called me and she said, they're building a special apartment house that's just for people with various low wages or low incomes. It's not like strictly low rent housing, but it's a community mixture. I don't know exactly, I think it's called Grand Oaks, and if there's a list, you got to get Betty on that list. And so it took a while. I called Jay. He didn't even know about it, but we got a phone number and I called them, and they said, oh, that list closed long ago. It closed when there were 1,000 people on the list. And I thought, I can't even tell BJ that. What am I going to do? And so every few days I would call, and cheerful, I could tell from the accent, from the Tagalog accent, cheerful people would say, no, we're so sorry. It's 1,000 people. But they never said don't call again. They were just so nice. And so one day I called and I said, magandang umaga. And they said, oh, you speak Tagalog. I said, well, I speak 5 phrases. And I just thought, I called you so much. You've been so nice. I I feel like you're all Filipino in that office, and most Filipinos are Catholic, and Catholics believe in miracles, and we need a miracle for my friend. But in order to get that miracle, she has to be on the list. Well, the list is closed. And then I think there must be some way. And she said, wait, maybe we could. I said, what if somebody drops out of the 1,000? Could her name go in? She said, well, maybe we could create a reserve list. So if somebody drops out, her name will go up. I said, all right. You know, this is so important to me. Thank you for being patient. May I call every 7 days or so? And she said, okay. And I said, salamat. She said, oh. That's thank you, but it's bigger than thank you. It comes from salam, which comes from shalom. It's bigger than thank you. And so I now had a friend, Cecilia, who would kind of be, and so I would call, no, I'm sorry, there's still 1,000 people ahead of her. At one point, AJ said, how many people are ahead of Betti? And I said, 1,000. How many? 1,000. Oh, we're gonna have to pray harder. And then one day when I called, I said, I can't find the reserve list. I can't find Betti. She said, looking. She told me, Betti's number 801. Somehow either the computer messed up or angels got into it or something, but and so I couldn't wait to call AG. There are only 800 ahead of us. Only 800. We were like drunken lottery winners. So thrilled. I have to go past my notes here. One day, I got a call, this time a male Filipino voice, asking if Betti was still interested in being on the list. I said, oh, yes, she is. He said, well, we're going to send out 300 new applications. They're much more detailed than the application before. Fill it out, get it in as soon as possible, and so you can get the appointment. Well, I filled it out, and I added a cover letter because of Betti explaining why she's mute, but why she's with it, she knows what's going on, she's fun, she's good socially. And so a few days later, AJ got a call. It said, we have set up an appointment for Miss Betti, and give me the address where to go for a live interview. And so I am going to have to sit on this bench for just a little bit, or maybe not. Anyway, skip it. AJ was glad. She knew where the place was where they're going to do the interview. She knew there was parking, but when she got there, construction work was going everywhere, including the places that used to be the parking lot. And so she said, we can't be late for this, Betti. You go inside that building. I'm going to write a note saying that I'm looking for a parking space. I'll be there soon. And you just stand there where I can see you. I'll drive by and I'll see you through the glass doors. And so AJ has parking angels that work for her all the time. But today, she couldn't find a parking place. She circled and circled and circled. Finally, she waved to Betti as she drove by. Finally, she did find a parking place. It's at a distance. She went as fast as she could. Breathless, she got to the door, and the lobby was empty. Where was just the thought, could someone have taken Betti? Could Betti have run into the street? What could have happened? This is where I might need the hanky. The door opened, and there was a tall, beautiful woman, well-dressed, with her arm around Betti. And she said, oh, you must see AJ. I got your note. It's all right. And AJ said, well, is it too late? And she said, oh, no, we've already conducted the interview. I would have asked anyway if I could just spend time with Betti alone, because I want to see if I could communicate with her. And I wanted to learn more about her, and I felt it would be best if I could do it on my own. She said, I want to congratulate you, Betti, because due to your outstanding credit rating, and due to the fact that you have gifts and qualities that would bring a lot to our community, you've just gone to the top of the list. And she said, Betty's shown me what the apartment that she wants, because for weeks before, every Saturday morning, AJ drove Betty to the construction site, and they would look at the construction site, and AJ would say, oh, look, Betty, they're going to pour some concrete today. I wonder what that's going to be. Oh, look, it looks like there's going to be a courtyard, and there's some planters there. And Betty would clap, 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 clap. And just, where do you think what apartment do you think you'd want? Probably ground floor. There's one that has a good light. And because there was an architectural drawing on the outside, watch the site. And so, the interviewer's name was Joan. She said she goes by Joni. She had that same drawing. I was like, Betty, do you know what apartment you would like? And Betty picked out the one that they'd been talking about all this time, that apartment. And she said, well, Betty, my apartment, I'll be manager, my apartment is on top of the business office. And every morning when I walk down the steps to my office, we can wave at each other. And when we look back at all the people who were pressuring us, in the meantime, a board and care facility that was pretty good had opened up in San Francisco, and people were telling us, well, you're praying, here's the answer to your prayer. Right here in San Francisco, she can go to the Pomeroy Center. What are you waiting for? Don't be so stubborn. This isn't fair to Betty. She might not have this chance again. Put her in, get her into the board and care. And we did. Shirley and I talked about it, and Shirley said, we're going to get heat. If we don't get what we're wanting for Betty, and we bypass the board and care, she said, but I'll stand with you. We're all praying. I'll stand with you. Well, we were so glad we did. And I remember that Michelle used to say, don't compromise for your Ishmael when your Isaac might just be around the corner. And Betty got her Isaac, and here's how they were going to do it. After they picked all 42 families who were going to be there, they all come on one day, they give them a key, they sound a whistle, and everybody opens up their doors at once, and they see their new apartment. And empty, and then they have a few weeks to move in. They know they have to change from where they're living and get other furniture. Well, there wasn't a dry eye in the house, but he was so thrilled. She was clapping, she was crying, she was petting the furniture, the refrigerator, everything was new. She'd never seen new refrigerators and sinks and everything. And AJ said, oh, it's beautiful. It's a woman architect. Everything is so that they make use of the cross breeze, but so that they save energy. It's bright, it's light, everything is new. She said, we can't take some of the funky furniture that's back at the apartment. We're going to have to get some other things. And I said, well, yes, except we're going to get that $7,000, so we'll get sooner or later. So let's just now get the things now that we need. Let's even get like new towels, new sheets. And AJ said, well, there's one thing you're going to have to get, because they're just 2 bedrooms and not 3. The weekend night staff have to have a place, and so they've got to have a hide-a-bed. And I said, oh, well, sure, that's under. She said, no, this has got to be a steel frame hide-a-bed. It's got to be the sturdiest you can get. She said, because that's some big heifers that work on that night staff. And so we looked. Betty went with me. We got a lovely couch, all expensive, but heavy duty, and other things that we went in. That it was a Chinese furniture store called Brothers, and they fell in love with Betty, and they'd say, would you like a lamp for your bedroom? Would you like a lamp for your desk? No, we'll just give it to you. Would you like this? Would you like that? And then we picked out some art pieces. I would pick out like 5 of them and say, Betty, pick out 2. And oh my, the way it worked out with the couch, the art pieces that Betty picked in, her colors, it looked like something out of the Living Home or Home Apartment magazine. It was just glorious, and it was Betty's. I have to catch up with my notes. So I went back to visit Jay and tell him how things were working out with AJ in his office. And Marianne, who had been Janet Pomeroy's secretary, Janet in the last few years had died in her mid-80s. And Marianne was glad to see me. She hadn't seen me since maybe the funeral. And I was so happy to hear about the good news for Betti. And she said, "So, how are things going in Oregon?" And I said, "Well, I'm spackling and painting and cutting 6-foot blackberry bushes." And she said, "No, I mean, how are things in Coos Bay? How are you getting along there?" She said, "Because when I lived in Oregon, people were very unfriendly. Maybe it's because I'm Canadian, I don't know, but I'm just wanting to know. I mean, do you have a plan how you're going to?" I said, "Well, I plan to blend." She said, "Oh, you'll blend all right with your red hat and purple boots." And anyway, she said, "I'm so glad Betti didn't have to be in board and care because she had a nightmare. Her son was an adult, but with schizophrenia. He signed himself into a board and care. She, in the meantime, was in Canada. He had some kind of cancer, and she couldn't get him out of the board and care. She had to go through legal twists. So she really understood what a blessing it was that we had Betti." Well, so I went to see Karen, the manager, and about the $7,000. And I said, "Oh, and also there's a $200 deposit that was on the contract, on the lease." And she said, "Well, you have to go to the old landlord for that." I said, "What? He died. Besides, that goes with the building." "Well, you'll just have to find his relatives or whatever." "No, we're not doing that." And I said, "Well, about the $7,000. She said, "Well, can you come back in a month?" I said, "Yeah, I can." So we went on getting things that were needed, and I was starting to get that feeling in the pit of my stomach. Let's see, the prodigal son spent all his wages, and you don't hatch your chickens before they're hatched or count them before they're hatched. And it was riotous living that the prodigal son had. I thought, oh my gosh. We just kept adding, because there's going to be $7,000. The couch was very expensive, but we needed it for the heifers. And everything, we just kept like, well, we'll just get that because there's $7,000. Well, we'll just add that. We'll just put that on. So to cover it, I took my money and got it without. We'll just pay me back after we get the $7,000. It was pretty clear she had no intention of giving us even a penny. So I thought, well, okay, what do I do? I'll go to small claims court. They said, well, that's only for $2,000. You would just be wasting the rest of that money because we can only get $2,000. And then, even if you win, how do you get that money from? Oh, I went to different storefront lawyers and in the Mission and different places. Just to get through the door, it'd be like $5,000. I thought, like, what can I do? I have a good relationship with the Jesuit University of San Francisco. I'll go visit the law department there. I said, would you have like an intern program where interns could write letters, cite laws, do whatever to intimidate this woman to get the $7,000? And they explained, this might go on a long time. The person might graduate before it's finished. They have to have real serious cases to complete their degree. So they couldn't help me. And I was praying about this. I was crossing the courtyard at University of San Francisco. And I had a flash of almost an image. It was kind of in a haze. It was a face I kind of remembered, kind of recognized. It was someone that Janet Pomeroy used to go to for advice. Years before, when he was a student at St. Ignatius Prep, he had been a student volunteer. And then he went on to Washington University in Washington, D.C., got his law degree, graduated at the top of his class, continued to come back, was on the board of directors of the center, was on the board or connections with any Italian Catholic program. He was very proud that he was a fourth generation San Francisco Italian from North Beach. And so let's put that text up that says, it tells you when the different chapters. You have that up? There's one that shows, and it says, the North Beach Consigliere. Oh, that's okay. We'll live without it. It's here. It's this one. Got that? Okay. So in the meantime, I had to find a way to get in contact with him. But in the meantime, a year had passed since Betti had gone to her special bridge housing, Grand Oaks apartment. And she had become friends with everyone there. And Joni, the manager, was just a special friend. And Joni decided that she and her husband had eloped years before, and it disappointed their families. She decided they would rededicate their vows, because they already had 2 little boys, but her husband's father was a cancer patient. It would be a joy for him to see them married. Her father was a black Muslim cleric. I didn't mention that Joni was who is Betti's benefactor is a black Muslim. And she dressed in regular suits during while she was on duty, and otherwise she wore the black Muslim garb. Anyway, I might do that tissue again. She asked if Betti would be her maid of honor at the wedding. Wow. And the invitation was dress as high as you want or as low as you want. Any way you want to dress, bring food, ethnic foods preferably. We'll have a big, and everyone was so happy. Well, Betti, she was just in heaven. And AJ called me and said, you know, Betti never graduated from high school. She never went to the prom. She never got married. She doesn't belong in any club or society where you dress up. Every woman needs that special dress that they remember from a special occasion, and this is Betti's. And she said, you know, Betti's so tiny and has such a perfect little figure. If I could get a dress for her, there's the seamstress here that would adjust it if it was needed. She said, there is a designer outlet in Oakland where you can get a $1,000 dress for $200 or $300. That would be Betti's special dress. She said, can we do it? And I was in such a habit of saying, yeah, because there's $7,000. I said, yeah, well, we got to do it. We got to do it. I said, you know, if there had been a man that had been Betti's conservator, he would not understand spending that money for one special day on one special dress. But no, I got you. Okay, well, anyway, AJ has this taste and style and talent. I used to tell her, you should be one of those people who dresses the Hollywood stars. I mean, she just, the outfits that she would help Betti select, she never just took over, but she'd say, Betti, would you like this and this with this and this and this? And Betti soon created her own style. And I said, yeah, whatever you want, you get it for her. Well, she came back with a dress. There was something Audrey Hepburn would wear, something Kristen Diana would wear. It didn't need any altering. It fit Betti perfectly. It was Alexander McQueen designer dress. Yeah, I think it was close to $300, but it was just remarkable. And then she found like a headband tiara. It wasn't sparkly, it wasn't gaudy or anything. It was sort of pewter colored, and it had 3 little moonstones in it that were the color of the dress, that was sort of a peachy color. Together, it was just stunning. I mean, Betti could have been in Vogue magazine. And so everyone was happy for Joni that day. Her dad, the Muslim cleric, was very friendly to everybody and welcoming to everybody. So everyone, you know, acknowledged the happiness for Joni, but everyone knew it was Betti's day. Everyone who attended the wedding was so thrilled, so personally thrilled for Betti. She was practically levitating, clapping and humming and singing and clapping. And it was worth whatever we had to pay, whether we get that $7,000 or not. But anyway, I had seen that face in kind of a almost vision, and I had left University of San Francisco. And so I remembered the name. I found the law firm, and I got an appointment for Betti. And then we waited for the day of that appointment. Well, now we're in part 2, which is the North Beach Consigliere. There's a wonderful old church in North Beach in San Francisco. It's it's almost a cathedral, not quite, but almost that feeling. It's white. It was built in the 1920s to replace the one that had been destroyed from the 1800s. And there's a beautiful expanse of green grass. There are benches on each side. Old Italian men sit on one side, old Italian women sit on the other side, waiting for the 7 a.m. mass, and waiting for somebody to come out of the church. And so this tall, slim man, you can tell he's a runner because he walks very agilely, balding pattern that just makes him look all the more intelligent, horn-rimmed glasses, walking by, and the old men all saluted, "The consigliere! The consigliere!" Because ever since the Godfather movie and the book, any Italian attorney was called the consigliere, from that part of the movie when the young Don has to say to their old attorney, "You're out, Tom. I have to have a wartime consigliere." And so consigliere used to just be a wise person that you could go to for information, but then he did become a lawyer. And so he was used to being saluted that way because he was a 4th generation Italian North Beach person. He could have gone east to any major law firm. He came back home, lived in a house he refurbished next to his grandmother's in North Beach, and very often went for prayers before Mass. And so as he was walking along, the old guys said, "Important case, Don?" Because he said, "I'm sorry, I can't wait and talk, I have to get going." "Important case?" "They're all important," he said. Maybe he knew Betti Peterson was coming that day, and maybe he didn't. Anyway, he stopped on his way to Cafe Trieste, which was the famous place the beatniks went to drink coffee in the 50s, and get his espresso and head to his office. Well, Betti and I were early. We were in the law offices of, Jacob Spotswood, Casper, and I'll have to look that up because she repeated this over and over again, the receptionist. Jacob Spotswood, Casper, and Murphy. Jacob Spotswood, Casper, and Murphy will put you through. Jacob Spotswood, Casper, and Murphy. No, Don is tied up this morning. And I thought, oh no, maybe we won't get to see him. And then I thought, no. She said he cleared his whole morning. He's cleared it for Betti. And so the office was what you'd expect: dark paneling, ficus trees, etches of old-time San Francisco on the walls, crystal carafe for coffee and orange juice and things. And he stood, shook hands with Betti, and said, I so enjoyed serving with your mother. She was a wonderful woman, smart, and she helped a lot of people. So we told him the story about the $7,000. And I said, I'm trying to find if there could be somebody like an intern who could write a letter, cite the laws, cite what the fines would be, or what, and but I can't seem to find anybody that could do that. And he said, well, we have them, but we're very strict with them. They have to do something that's important for the firm, and it's important for their growth, so we wouldn't just give them a project like that. And he said, besides, it's more than you might think. You could win this, but getting the money is another thing. Mm-hmm. And so he paused, and you know how brainy people will steeple their hands in a font? Mm-hmm. And then he moves his hands up, And I thought, was he praying? Is he meditating? What? And then he moved his hands down and raised his head and said, I believe I'm qualified to take this case. Well, he was an advising attorney to the Republican Party of California. I think he'd be okay for Betti. He said, it's just that to win, we have to get something on her. He said, I know this kind of landlord. Any letter will just go right in the trash. There'll be no consequences. We have to get something on her. And this part kind of gave me the chills. He said, you can get something on practically anybody. And he said, so it might take time. I'll have to do research, and I don't have that much time, so I'll have to tack 15 minutes on here, 20 minutes on there to other people's cases when I'm doing research in an area that seems related to it. He said, now you're near the end zone where this will just be null and void anyway, so I'll work as fast as I can, but I can't go any faster than that. Feel free to give me a call. And, he said, what do you know about this landlord? What does she do? And I said, oh, she's an OBGYN at Kaiser. He said, how do you know this? I said, well, Betti and I were doing laundry one day, and the spigot for the laundry overflowed in the garage where the laundry is. It was flooded, and I started picking up these banker's boxes, and the lids came off, and I could see that these were medical records. He said, what? Medical records? That's a HIPAA infraction, and there's a heavy fine that goes with that. Can you get in that garage and get photos of that? I said, I can't anymore, and I don't have the keys anymore, and it would be kind of risky to sneak in at this point. I said, okay, is there anybody in the neighborhood that can watch? And I said, well, there's a little old lady that sits in the window with her poodle across the street, and she used to be Betti's babysitter years ago. So he said, okay, she may not have a cell phone, but make sure she has a camera, a notepad, and binoculars. I want the license plates of anybody that comes and goes, descriptions of people, when they go, when they come, and all that. I said, yeah, okay, glad to do that. He said, so I won't always answer your call, but feel free to call and just leave a message. And I don't think we texted, just leave a message and we'll get back to you and I'll tell you what I have. So a few weeks, he said, now I'm ready to send out the first letter, which is going to be just a simple letter stating the law, what anybody else would do, what your law student would do, and the consequences, and that's it, but it's on my firm's letterhead. So, okay, so the letter went out. Then he sent me a copy of there was a reply from an attorney named Paul Wong, stating that I have read your letter and I'm aware of the law, and I've advised my client to pay the $7,000. And then at the bottom of the letter, he wrote in ink, so if she saw it, it wasn't copied in the letter, but I so admire your work. I've followed some of your cases. And I can't remember what he said. It was kind of like, oh, thank you for going after my client. I'm so impressed that I get to write to you. Not that he literally wrote that, but there was that tone. I thought, well, I wonder if Karen knows she's paying her attorney to write letters of admiration from the other side. And I thought, and they must be wondering, how does this woman unable to speak, mentally retarded, cerebral palsy, how does she get one of the top firms in California to represent her? She must have some clout. Maybe she's related to somebody on the law team. And so then I called Karen, and she said, we can't pay that kind of money. We're just poor working people. And I said, okay, I knew never not to do anything that would make her angry and then not ever take my call. So I just said, okay, we'll be in touch. And so I told that to Don. Did I say at any point his name is Don Casper? Okay, his name is Don Casper. So he sent a second letter listing all the properties that she owned, the millions of dollars worth of property that she owned, the building that she was in, a large home in the Excelsior district, which had, he had the many codes that were broken on that and the many things that were wrong, and some kind of property in the financial district. Now, I don't know what that was, and I wish I would have asked. And so, mentioning and she was going to be having trouble with it, and so not only the valuations of the property, but problems with the property that wouldn't pass inspection. And so, okay, so sent that to her. Got another letter from the lawyer that said, I've advised my client to pay the $7,000.
Yeah.
And so, okay, I called her again. She said, I'm not going to pay that. If anything, Betty owes me money. I lost thousands on them through the years. I said, I know they always pay their rent on time. She said, no, but I was nice to them, and I let them stay. If I had charged what you could get on the market, I had thousands more from that unit. So if anything, they owe me money because I was very kind to them. So I'm not going to pay it. So, okay, I told Don that. And then Don reported back what the next thing was. He called her attorney and he said, I'm going to talk to you about some things I'm not going to put in writing. Oh my goodness, all the things he had. Immigration records, falsification of different things. Her brother is practicing medicine without a license in Illinois, in Iowa. Problems in Hong Kong. Gambling problems with her father, or her pops, as Don calling pops, has some gambling addiction. And many things, immigration, did I mention that? Of different relatives, ties in Hong Kong where their family trust or something is associated with another family group that reaches into all of Asia with all different kinds of, so it's very enmeshed in things. And anyway, there were other things that, they were so harsh. It just kind of surprised me. I thought, gosh, she seems like kind of a sweet little lady. And and Don said he told the attorney, a couple of phone calls, a couple of emails, and I can keep you and your client busy for the next 10 years. And it'll cost a whole lot more than $7,000. I want to see a cashier's check for $7,000 made out to the Betty Peterson Special Needs Trust on my desk by next Wednesday. And so Wednesday came and I called him. I said, Don, is the check on your desk? He said, no, it's not. And I said, so you think she's not going to pay? He said, she'll pay, but she'll probably pay you because she wants to show that she has no respect for you, for me, and she also wants to show that she was going to pay the money all along. She's not writing it to an attorney. She's writing it to just who she would have written it to. He said, so it'll probably be there around Friday, but it's supposed to be a cashier's check, but if it isn't, photocopy it right away and cash it immediately. And so sure enough, spidery handwriting to me, attention, Betty. And then, yes, it was a personal check, no mention or anything in it. And so I did that, I cashed it, and I wrote her a thank you note. Just as if this was just ordinary, thanking her and saying Betty's going to use the money for furnishings for her apartment, which we did it, in the past. I just couldn't believe it. I don't know how I happened to be in San Francisco, but I went to Don's office to thank him. I said, how can we thank you for this? This means so much. Do you want any portion of the $7,000? Oh, no. That was like the worst thing I could say. And I said, well, we have to do something. You probably get all kind of offers of dinner at Caesar's, or I don't know. He said, all right, if you want to do something, I don't have any Oregon wine in my collection. Next time you're down, bring me some Oregon wine, a red and a white. And I said, oh, I'll get you a case of each one. And so I was thrilled about it. Just this little wine store in Tuesday, the woman that works there or manages it is wonderful, and she loved the story. And she knew that I wanted to really make it special. I wanted to tell the story of each wine the history of the roots, where they got it, the soil, the water. And so she helped me. She sent for all kind of information, the families, and if they won any awards. And so she helped me get all the different bottles. And she was giving them to me at a great discount. And I got Maya Graphics to work with me to do special tags on each one so that it would show we really thought. We didn't just go in and say, give us a bottle of wine. And I've been a museum curator, and I had to write a lot of things of provenance for paintings and things. And so this is kind of the same. I kind of did it in that style. And I thought, I told Don we'd be back in the fall, and we'll get a little wagon and then put festoon it, and Betty will pull it in. And so I was looking forward to that. But then one day I received a call. They said, Ola, is this Ola? I said, yes. And they said, Dick Spotswood asked me to call you. Is this the Ola that is development director at the Pomeroy Center? I said, yes, well, I used to be. I do some projects now, but I live in Oregon. And he said, well, this is Jean Payne. Do you remember me? I was on the board. I said, oh, yeah, I know who you are. You're Don Casper's best friend, and he's godfather to all your children. And he said, so you're in Oregon, you don't get the papers, you don't know. Don was killed 5 days ago. I said, killed? Was it foul play? He said, no, they say it wasn't. They said it was hit and run. And so he explained, Don spent about 3 days a week with their family, and they had a summer house in Napa, and they were giving a barbecue, and he was faithful about his running. So he'd gone off to run, and when he didn't show up for the barbecue, Jean's wife became worried maybe he'd sprained an ankle or something. And it was such a horrible scene. The doctors and morticians have said he probably died shortly after being struck. It looks like his body flew 100 feet, shoes off. And now there was a video, or a security camera that took a video of an older white Ford truck. This is what got me, with the license plate obscured, going at a fast pace. But it didn't show the impact, it just showed the truck going around the corner. And there were skid marks that the police could see, and that was just it. Don's godchildren held a vigil saying, justice for Uncle Tom, justice for Uncle Don, and why isn't anyone looking into this? But it just kind of, San Francisco police said, no, and it just kind of faded away. Apparently there was a pretty impressive funeral. The former Mayor Willie Brown was the best speaker because they had been political rivals. One was very far left and Don was a conservative. But they had worked together because they loved San Francisco. And he gave the most beautiful tribute. People were weeping, and anyway, it was. Then I thought, what do I do with this wine? I worked so hard to make it special. And I thought, well, I suppose I could give it to his law firm. That'd just be wine to them. I could give it to Jean, his friend. It wouldn't. It just bothered me. There had to be something. And then I remembered, we have, for the Pomeroy Center, a gala fundraising event every year. And I thought, that's the way we will do it. I got a picture of Don. I wrote just like about a 3-sentence description of Don helping. I guess I named it. I don't know if I named her or not. And I called it the Consigliere's Fee. And will you help us pay the Consigliere's fee by bidding on this item? Wow. I got an old Superior Court judge who was retired to help set it up. I wanted in tears, and the photo of Don at the top. And everybody stopped to read it. And that way people would recognize what he had done. And then the old Superior Court judge started herding people that he thought would be interested toward the table where they write their bids. He said he tried to start a bidding war. He'd put some bids in himself. And so in the end, it was 4 attorneys, 2 couples, man and woman, they were all attorneys, that vied for it, and then 1 couple got it, and they paid the consigliere's fee. It went to the center that Betti loved, and there was just a feeling like, okay. And every time, whoever that got it, every time they take it out, probably all their other friends are young attorneys, they're going to talk about, oh, this is Don's wine. And his gesture and his goodness would live on. I've got a couple of more short stories here, and that won't take very long.
Do you need to sit down, Ola? Do you need to sit down?
I'm thinking it's better if I keep standing.
Okay.
Oh, one of my other stories is Unity Lutheran Church is within walking distance of where Betti lives. And from the minute she came, they welcomed her, they embraced her, she made her family. And when they made her a greeter once a month, she thoroughly greeted everyone. And clap, clap, clap. And in the Lutheran Church, they have communion every week, and the people go row by row down to the front to take communion. Betti and AJ usually sat in the back, and AJ would go with her. But this one time, AJ said, Betti, I think you can go yourself. And so, since they sat at the back, Betti started walking. And then suddenly the Spirit overtook her, and she started dancing and clapping down the aisle. The organist, a quick thinker, started playing When the Saints Go Marching In. And everybody clapped and danced. And from that, very often, they clap and dance. They merged with 2 other Lutheran churches, and Pastor John said, there's something I have to tell you about Unity Lutheran Church. We do things a little differently than traditional Lutheran churches. Sometimes we shake our hips and clap our hands. And then he said, welcome to the new Lutheran Church. Well, Betti walks with a walker now, but she still leads conga lines of spiritual praise every now and then. If they have an evening event or something, they've included her. She had so many things that happened to her where prayer was needed, injuries, surgeries, all kinds of things. She got used to seeing her name on the prayer request, and she went to the pastor and pointed. He had taken her name off the prayer list because, she seemed like she was well. No. And so he announced, from now on, every week, Betti Peterson's name will appear on the list. And so there she was. She was on the prayer list. Then my final story here is, after about 14 years, the heifers had broken through on the couch. The area closest to the TV had a big dip in it, and the armrest was now wobbly from too much pressure against it. AJ had shampooed it many times, and she said, there's just a funkiness in it, I can't get out. And she said, you got to get another couch. So they went out and started looking for couches. Nothing special. Until they went to Lazy Boy, and there was this magnificent couch of some kind of an unusual brocade fabric with beigey pink color with little pieces of lurex thread of different colors woven in. Anyway, it just took Betti's breath away. And I was so glad to hear that the couch had already sold, because it was $1,000 more than we had in the account. And what made it so expensive is inside, instead of the flimsy cotton thing, there was this, I don't know if you call it a mattress, kind of like a mattress, where you could, with a button, make it rise to the loft that you want, or down, or the middle, or the front. And that was the part that made it so very expensive, plus it being a beautiful thing. But a wealthy Hillsborough, California matron had already purchased it, and so that was it. Betti kept wanting to go back to the place and look at the couch because she had so loved it. And there'd just be that space, and Betti would point there and point to herself. There, me. And AJ would say, Betty, you know, the couch was sold. It belongs to somebody else now, and they don't have any more. And she just kind of kept talking about the couch. I mean, even at home, she was making gestures for it. One day I got a call, and it was AJ, and she said, I have the manager of Lazy Boy on the other line, and he is, the wealthy matron couldn't make it fit anywhere in her house. And he just told his driver to head toward Betty's. He's taking $1,500 off the price of the couch. He's not going to charge sales tax, and they will remove the old couch. All they need is a debit card number, and Betty has her couch. And AJ said, well, you have to do it. I'll put the money in if you can't. I said, no, that's, might leave about $200 in the account, but if this is from God, we'll build it up again. And so AJ said, Ola, did you pray about that couch? I said, no. She said, I didn't pray about the couch either. She said, but Betty did. She talked to God, or God talked to her, and she wasn't being petulant. She was saying, yeah, I know this is my couch. When am I going to get it? And so, clap, 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 and a hum. God is good. Now, would you just show all the other photos that are there?
I have been.
Oh, you have been? Oh, smarter than, I should have realized that. So anyway, the very last one, it says, abiding in Jesus, 3 claps and a hum. That's how Betty really has learned how to pray. Remember, I said, when she was in her 40s, she was still a teenager, in the things that she did and couldn't concentrate and all that. But now, she was a woman. Oh, I forgot the sweetest part of the story that I forgot. When Don was still alive and in his office, the day that he said, no promises, but Betty, I think we're going to get your money. She was wearing a little suit, a full skirt, a little blouse, bolero jacket over it. And when he said that, she got up, walked around his desk, and kind of curtsies. I don't know if she felt her knees, or she just curtsied down in front of him. And she sat there, and she went, like, lower your head. Lower down. Lower some more. Lower some more down. This way, move your head this way. And he said, you want to whisper something in my ear? She pressed her cheek, her lips to his cheek in the sweetest, most devout, most expressive. I'll remember it all the days of my life. I was reaching around in my purse to try to find any kind of tissue paper. Don was clearing his throat, adjusted his glasses, adjusted his tie, coughed some more. Finally, just to stall time so he could hold his emotions, he took his glasses off, got something, cleaned them, held them up to see. And he said, well, Betty, yeah, we're going to... And I said to the Holy Spirit, I think Betty just won her case. And I thanked him, the Holy Spirit, for guiding us there. And the other thing I forgot to tell you is we left the law office. There was a sign that said, our specialty is landlord-tenant law and personal injury. I had no idea. I didn't even know there was such a category. And Don probably thought I knew that. He probably thought that's why we went there. I just went because I saw that kind of a vision. And so, isn't God good?
Yes, he is.
He's worth three
He is good.
claps and a hum. And that's it.
Very good.
Praise God.
Very good. Very good.
So thanks for putting all those photos through.
Yeah.